Our players are ready down in the feature match area. It's Braun-Duin on your left with Team Energy, Tim Harris on your right with Esper Approach. Both these players 7-2, very much in top 8 contention. And we are going to watch these two players duke it out as Harris is going to start things off with a Fetid Pools. We go over to Brian, who's got a Forest, no Attune, as we'll pass the turn back over to Tim. Remember, Esper Approach getting the job done at Grand Prix Atlanta just a couple weekends ago. The Black Splash, not for a ton, but you will find some copies of Vraska's Contempt and 4 copies of Fatal Push. At the end of the day, however, this deck is all about just resolving Approach of the Second Sons, killing your things before you kill them, as here's an opt from Tim. And then the Approaches will get the job done, and maybe in some situations, Torrential Gearhawk will attack for victory. Certainly the Conduit was the play there for Brian on turn 2 for Tim. He's got a search for his Kanta, an irrigated farmland, and we're going to head back over to Brian now. Brian will draw a card. He does have a copy of Bristling Hydra, which is important right now. So now he'll get an energy from the hub, use energy from the Servant, so remain neutral. Bristling Hydra will not enter the battlefield, grant 3 more energy. Brian's up to 5, and that's actually one of the more important cards in this matchup. Bristling Hydra can clock the opponent pretty quickly.
It's sort of the secondary long tusk hub in terms of speed, but you can already see the issue here. BBD has gotten what you would term to be a good draw. I mean, he's gone turn 2 Servant into turn 3 Bristling Hydra, and yet, Harris is still at 20 here, and if you imagine BBD getting hit by Fumigate here, it seems hard for him to come back.
Yes. Now, only 2 copies of Fumigate in Tim Harris's list, but he does have 4 copies of Settle the Wreckage. There are 2 copies of Vraska's Contempt. There are 4 copies of Fatal Push. For now, here come the beatdowns as Brian goes up to 6 energy. After Brian, the goal is to try to clean this game up as fast as possible. Tim has no blocks, of course, and Brian's just going to deal 6. Harris is going to fall down to 14. The follow-up here for Brian's going to be an Attune. That's going to resolve. So Brian's going to go up to 8 energy. He'll search up a basic land, and this will be a perfect time for Tim Harris to resolve a Glimmer of Genius.
Yeah, he was really hoping that BBD wouldn't do anything of note this turn. Good opportunity to resolve this card.
And he will take this opportunity to resolve Glimmer of Genius. A very powerful draw spell. We'll let him scry 2 and get 2 energy, and in a moment here, draw 2 cards. A couple of lands there for Tim are immediately going to go to the bottom. Looks like Approach and a mystery card is what he's drawn off of Glimmer. Now he'll trigger the search for his Kanta. He's going to consult his hand before deciding what he wants to do with that. And it looks like Essence Scatter is going to go to the graveyard. Tim going to take a moment to shuffle Brian's deck, post the tune. Now he'll draw a card for the turn. Found another copy of Glimmer. You can see just how easily this deck can actually get through itself to find its relevant cards, Patrick.
Yeah, and there's a lot of scrying here going on between the Glimmers and the searches and the ops.
The irrigated farmland is going to enter the battlefield tap there for Tim Harris. We're going to head back over to Braun-Duin now. BBD will draw a card, Botanical Sanctum.
You can see BBD, I think, looking at Abrade and lands.
Here's an attack for 6. Tim Harris is going to take that damage again, so he's going to fall down to 8. Keep in mind, I believe Brian mulliganed to 5 this game as well. So this is definitely a good draw for Brian, and Harris has really had nothing to interact.
Or appears to not be choosing to. He's got Settle the Wreckage and Vraska's Contempt.
Okay. Here's Glimmer again. He's going to scry 2. Looks like he's found Settle the Wreckage now. I don't know if he had one in his hand previously. But if he didn't before, he has the option of taking one now. And he'll take both of those cards. He will untap, search for his Kanta. Glimmer's going to go to the graveyard. He'll draw a card. Found a copy of Censor. Concealed Courtyard going to enter the battlefield tapped. And Tim is just going to pass the turn back over to Brian. We will go over to Brian now, who's picked up a copy of Whirler Virtuoso. Now, of course, at this point, people are very familiar with Esper Approach and Approach of the Second Sun decks, in general. So they know about Settle the Wreckage. That's not going to take anyone by surprise. That's for sure. They know removal's available, and Brian, of course, a very seasoned player, Plays a ton of Magic online, a ton of Magic in general. He knows what's going on here. Here comes Bristling Hydra by itself. This is with respect to settle.
Yes. Although, you know, you can kind of only force it out of Harris's hand here once you've presented a lethal attack. So it is giving some breathing space to Harris potentially, but BBD scoped out the situation. Harris feeling like now is a good time to commit a settle.
So Settle the Wreckage will resolve. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search his or her library. For that many basic land cards, put those cards on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle his or her library. It's like a mega path to exile.
But also gets around exiling effects too.
Correct. Correct. The follow-up here for Brian's gotta almost certainly be that Virtuoso. So there it is. A little more energy there for Brian. Gonna bring it up to 11. Yeah, kick it over to Tim Harris. We're gonna go. Tim is gonna do a little look with his search for his Kanta, and now he's gonna transform that land into his Kanta, the Sunken Ruin. Fumigate the draw, and that's a good one. That's going to clear away all these creatures. And Fumigated card you talked so much about leading into this matchup.
Yes, Harris has only 2 in the main deck, but he's got a lot of ways to hunt it down. And post board, when PBD has access to copies of Negate, this card is, you know, less likely to be a game winner all by its own. But game 1, very hard for PBD to beat this.
Looks like Brian's going to abrade his own threat, I believe, so that Tim does not gain that much life. And now if you're Brian, the hope here is to peel off a couple of Glorybringers. I think, you know, hasty threat. Long Tusk Cub is the draw. Not the worst draw, I'll say. He can make that thing into a pretty big creature pretty quickly.
Yeah, but you're looking at Harris's hand of 7 cards, and you can't feel too optimistic about this cup being able to go the distance.
I wouldn't be feeling great as Censor will be cycled. There's a Drowned Catacombs for Tim. Torrential Gearhulk, disallow, approach of the Second Sun. All those cards in hand right now for Tim Harris. Harness Lightning the draw here for Brian. Which, oddly enough, does have a little bit of application here.
As an answer to the Gearhulk?
Answer to the Gearhulk. Can target your own creature to get some more energy. You don't have to use it.
Nice.
You know, so, look, it's better than nothing. Brian just going to get in here for 2. Not going to present lethal this turn. This is up to 12 energy now. Here, Vraska's Contempt will take care of the Long Tusk Cub. Brian might Harness Lightning his own creature. Yep.
Sweet. Like you said.
There's applications.
It's not quite a dead draw.
I told you.
He's gotten to cash in a Braid for 1 life. He's got, or -1 life on the other side. He's gotten to cash in his Harness for -2 life on the other side.
That's right.
Hard to complain. Things looking good for BBD.
Well, might be a.
We're done.
Might be a bit of a stretch. There's a Vraska's Contempt going to Tim's hand thanks to the Ascanta.
Here.
Disallow the draw. Now, a great time to play this, Approach of the Second Sons. Pretty safe.
Like we mentioned, a lot of the appeal of this deck is your game 1s against Teamer.
Yeah.
And it's on display here. BBD has drawn a bunch of threats, but they weren't really fast enough, nor do their text boxes matter. He's drawn some removal spells that have no targets.
That certainly doesn't help that he mulliganed a 5 too.
Sure.
However, he's going to keep playing it out. Here's a Rogue Refiner. Trigger. Up to 13. Let's make it 15 energy. Attune. Can make it 17 energy. Hello. No Glorybringers here for BBD as Tim is going to untap. He'll draw. Found a copy of Opt. Just looking for that second approach now is Tim.
I remember that he has Ascanta plus this Opt that allows him to siphon. So you can get to it very quickly here.
Here comes Rogue Refiner. Tim happy to take the 3, fall down to 11. Rootbound Crag there for Brian. Tim is going to activate Ascanta. Looks like he's found Fatal Push and Disallow. He'll take Disallow.
Anyone's game.
Yeah. Brian has seen enough. As Tim Harris is going to win game number 1 here over Brian Braun-Duin. Esper approach very quickly up a game over Team Energy, but as we said right at the top, this is the appeal of the deck.
Yep, game 1, BBD just, his threats aren't fast enough, and he's got too many dead cards, and both of those were on display against Harris.
We will be going to the sideboard here in just a moment, but first, a couple words from our sponsors. Let's take a look at some sideboards here very quickly. We will start with Brian Braun-Duin, as he'll be on the play for game number 2. 4 Negate, 3 Chandra's Defeat, 3 Vizier of Many Faces, 2 Supreme Will. On this, a Steward of Elements, a River's Rebuke, and a Confiscation Coup. Some pretty obvious ones here, yeah?
I think this is an easy swap here. He has 7 removal spells and a Braid and Harness Lightning, which can quickly become 4 copies of Negate, 2 copies of Supreme Will, and the 1 Nissa.
Yeah, I think it's very clean swap.
Very clean swap.
For Tim Harris, 4 Regal Caracal, 3 Duress, 2 Scarab God, 2 Torrential Gearhawk, 2 Negate, 1 Vraska's Contempt, and 1 Jace's Defeat. He can go up to the full 4 Torrential Gearhawk if you'd like after sideboard.
And I think he wants to have a little bit more threats, particularly creatures, anticipating that BBD is going to be setting into these Negates. I think the Caracal's not appropriate for this matchup because Brian can pretty easily brawl with a threat like that, but I think the Scarab Gods, the Torrential Gearhawks are good here. I'd want an extra copy of Vraska's Contempt, anticipating maybe some more Planeswalkers on the board.
Well, those are the options there for both players. Brian will be on the play here for game number 2, as he lost game number 1 rather quickly, truth be told. Not a very good matchup there for Brian, but we are underway here in game number 2. At least game 1, the matchup was bad. Game 2, I think things get a lot better because Negate's very good against him.
Yes, although I like Harris having all the creatures in the sideboard. Those are threats that can win the game by themselves, Torrential Gearhulk and the Scarab God, and they dodge Negate. So I like that as a plan.
Attune with Ether off of Rootbound Crag is what Brian will do on his second turn of the game. And there is a Mountain.
I imagine the Caracal is more for beatdown matchups.
Yes. I don't know. I've seen players board in this matchup before. I'm not sure how good it is.
Right. You can just go full. You can just load up on creatures. That's one plan that you can have. The other is you view Caracal as more of an anti-mono red measure, and you use the Scarab God and your Torrential Gearhulks to win in matchups like this.
We're going back over to Brian now. He's up to 3 energy. I'm imagining Rogue Refiner. It's actually going to be Whirler Virtuoso, however. Going to go up to 6 energy. He's got the ability to make a couple Thopters here. We're going to see an Opt on Brian's end step from Tim. Tim will scry 1. Top card will... I don't know. It's going to stay on top, so he's happy with it. Untap. And draw. And let's see, he picked up a copy of Fumigate. There's a hub. We're going to go back over to Brian.
BBD here wasting no time making some Thopters.
Nope, he knows his plan.
No ambition to do anything with that energy other than attack.
Just have a copy of Negate in hand already, too.
Right, so you can see the plan shifting up here. He's got 4 points of power on the battlefield. He's got a little bit of cover in Negate, and hopefully, Harris doesn't have a whole bunch of cheap removal spells. He's leaning really heavily on 1 spell. And Negate can swallow that up.
Servant of the Conduit's going to bring Brian up to 3 energy. Here's an attack for 4. Harris is going to fall down to 16. Brian's got a pretty good base of creatures on the battlefield now. Now the plan, of course, is to protect him via Negate. Pretty simple stuff, truth be told. However, a Fatal Push is going to go after that Servant of the Conduit, and that's going to resolve. So now Tim Harris is going to untap, and he'll draw a card. Picked up an Irrigated Farmlands, also has a Fetid Pools in hand, so some of his lands are going to enter the battlefield tapped, which means he cannot represent Settle the Wreckage this turn. Brian going to very quickly cash in that energy for another Thopter. Brian going to untap here. Prepare for his 5th turn of the game. He's picked up another copy of Servant of the Conduit. In for 5 comes Brian. That's a Mountain. This is a Servant. It's going to resolve up to 2 energy once again. Harris will draw a card here. He's picked up a swamp. It's an untapped land for land number 5. This, I imagine, will be Fumigate number 1, but we know that's not resolving.
Yeah, the alternative line here is you could try to test spell BBD with the Settle the Wreckage and then untap and Fumigate if you assume this one's no good. And BBD has suspiciously left up all this mana all these turns where he's played the Server the Conduit.
Well, Brian actually goes with Supreme Will instead of the negate, which is actually even worse news for Tim because Tim doesn't know he has a negate. Here's an attack from Brian. This is going to be attack for 7. Tim's going to fall down to 4.
Yeah, the Supreme Will is better if Harris has a creature the next turn.
Yeah.
But the negate, I think, is better against a wider range of stuff.
Here is Nissa. Brian will do a little scry 2 here. Both those cards are going to go to the bottom. And Brian again with negate at the ready. So Harris will draw a card. He's picked up an island. He'll play Fetid Pools. He'll just simply pass the turn back. Brian will be untapping. In a moment here, he'll be drawing. Maybe we'll see an activation of Nissa before he does attack. But so long as he does have that negate in his hand, and it looks like he does because he's had it for some time, he is clear for takeoff. And negate will take care of things. So Brian Braun-Duin is going to win game number 2 here against Tim Harris. Teamer Energy, as per approach, are going to get ready for the 3rd game. And you can see a very large difference between game 1 and game 2.
That is about as stereotypical of the first 2 games as you can get in this matchup, with Harris winning game 1 on easy mode, with BBD having too many dead cards and not enough of a clock. And then game 2, BBD able to drop 1 threat, put a lot of pressure on the battlefield off of that 1 threat, and cover it with negate and Supreme Will.
Well, these players are going to go back to the drawing board. A touch here for game number 3. And while they do that, a couple messages here from our sponsors. Game number 3 about to be underway here between Brian Braun-Duin and Tim Harris. That's Team Energy as that's for approach. For Tim, he'll be on the play here for game number 3. More importantly, he needs to hope that Brian doesn't draw too many counter spells.
Well, the bigger problem, I think, was that Harris spent a lot of turns not doing anything. I think these negates and Supreme Wills become a lot less impactful if you're able to have targeted removal or counter spells for the first threat. If you aren't leaning so heavily on one sweeper, then you can afford to have a random spell here or there countered. But Harris there, all his eggs were in that one basket. He didn't do anything for the first 3 or 4 turns, and then he had to play catch up on one high impact spell. That's where negate and Supreme Will, they're going to bury you.
A Tune with Ether off of Ether Hub from Brian is how he'll start the game out. He's up to 2 energy as he searches for a basic forest. For Tim, he's got an irrigated farmland. Now he's got a drowned catacomb as we head back over to BD. Just a Spire Bluff can out, and no 2-drop. So an opt here from Tim.
For example, let's say Harris makes his land drop this coming turn and is able to disallow BBD's turn 3 play. That's already doing a lot of work to take the sting out of negate and Supreme Will.
Concealed Courtyard will be land number 3, and he does have disallow in the hand ready to go. So Long Tusk Cub the draw here for Brian. Brian's got a spell to play, and as you said, it's going to be disallowed, and this is a pretty big deal.
Already a much better start to this game than the one that we saw in game number 2.
Further Rocheroso bites the dust. Tim with the Fetid Pools. We're going to head back over to Brian. Brian, we draw a card for his 4th turn. You see the Cub. He picked up a Hub. I got nothing else to rhyme with those 2. Especially we'll see a Chandra here in just a moment. Doesn't rhyme.
What other word? I mean, what other words did you go to?
Well, there's
rub and hub and cub.
I went from Cub to Hub. I could have went to Bottle Full of Bub if I wanted to work some 50 Cent in the broadcast.
I would have gone with Schlub.
Schlub is where you would have gone. Okay. Got it. Here's Chandra.
And I like going for the Chandra here from BBD side. You've already seen it disallow. It's likely your play would have been censored last turn had that been the counter spell.
That's true.
Harris, maybe he's got some negates in his deck, maybe not. So it seems risky playing into 3 open mana, but actually, I think there's a reasonable chance that this Chandra resolves, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, it's in there. So Chandra Torch of Defiance, up to 5 counters now, given the +1. Brian exiles a card. Tim falls down to 18. The ultimate's not that hard to get to, because we're definitely going to play a couple more turns here, folks. And if Chandra does ultimate, it's going to be very difficult for Tim to win. So he's got to be a bit concerned about this Planeswalker here. Now, he does have a copy of Vraska's Contempt. Remember, he's running 2 copies of that.
Ooh.
And he's going to play that right. Really?
Vraska's Contempt exiles a Planeswalker.
Okay, yep.
We're back in it.
That's nice. That's nice.
Although that's really not really a route to anything. Although now actually I do have bingo, assuming that I can oversell an advertisement, which is, you know, a much larger question. On Deathgorge, Scavenger exiles a creature, but with the standard rounds about to end, unlikely.
Seems a bit, but there's Sunday.
There's Sunday.
There's Sunday.
And I've gotten scavenged in Modern.
Oh, you have?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, you say that like it happens a lot.
Yes, it does.
Okay. For the Virtuoso Long Tusk Cub. Those are the plays there for Brian as the energy does uptick a touch. Approach to the second sun's the draw there for Tim Harris. Tim might be having some difficulty hitting those land drops here. He might have to play a main phase Glimmer of Genius for help. We'll see. There's an opt first. Scry 1. Top card becomes the bottom. He'll draw a card. I'm not sure. Looks like he's got a Fatal Push on the Cub, but he did not hit a land drop. So he opted to opt instead of Glimmer, and that may have cost him.
Well, you know, if he has the Fatal Push in hand, the opt gives him 2 looks at a land, and in the worst case where he misses, still cast a removal spell. If his Glimmer misses, if he doesn't find an untapped land, and it has to produce black mana, he's just shields down and taking a ton of damage.
Yeah, it could be ugly. It could be ugly. There's a hub.
It's not the most mana efficient play from Harris's side, but I think it gives him the ceiling of finding a land without the floor of do nothing, Seiko.
Sure,
I'm
sure.
dead.
Brian looks like he's going to play in a tune here. That's going to resolve. So he's up to 3 energy. Further Virtuoso and friends will be causing the damage here in just a moment.
And BBD would negate in hand. And you can see the difference. When Harris is able to keep his head above water in the early turns of the game, it's harder for BBD to generate these high leverage spots with the counter spells. It's still going to be good, most likely, but it is not like it was in game 2 where Harris had no shot at beating it.
Oh, there's your attack for 4. Keep in mind, Brian has 3 energy for the hubs and the Virtuoso if you'd like to make another Thopter, as Harris falls down to 12. And you can see at least 1 negate, potentially 2 in Brian's hand right now. Here's Glimmer of Genius. You generally don't fight over this kind of card, but it looks like Brian will right now. Maybe sensing some weakness on Tim's side. Fumigate the draw right off the top of the deck. Brian's got another negate, however, to counter that as well. So we're going to go back over to Brian here in just a moment. Not going to make a Thopter. Clock remains the same.
I don't know about that, though, because the clock's fuzzy. You know, he plays something like Vraska's Contempt, and now he's up 2.
Sure.
So, I don't know all the considerations from BBD's side, but it's not as simple as just, well, I've got him dead in, you know, 3 turns. What's the difference?
Well, there's an attack for 4.
I suppose that the not making, if he's concerned about Settle the Wreckage, it allows him basically to, he keeps his energy around in case something else manifests, and he can still make a token in response to Settle if it breaks that way.
Yep. I thought we might see an attack for 4. He's not going to make it yet, and Tim does actually have a copy of Settle the Wreckage in hand. Looks like he has an Essence Scatter too. He's actually going to Essence Scatter here. Okay. So now Brian can attack freely for that 4 that I felt he was going to attack for earlier because Settle the Wreckage is not available mana-wise right now. So Harris is going to fall down 2-4. Pass that turn back over to Tim. There's a Fetid Pools, and there's the battlefield tapped, of course. And if Brian draws a counterspell here, obviously the game ends. It's a Rootbound Crag to go along with another land, however. So how does Brian want to attack it? And this is what you see he has to think about. You attack with everything and get settled, you are left with 1 Thopter. You bridge, you maybe attack with 2 Thopters. He might still settle. He might not and just say go down to 2, but then you're giving him time to get to Gearhulk.
Or you know, or he goes, okay, I'll go to 2, end of turn Glimmer. And, you know, maybe he was missing the piece that you were playing around, and now he has it. So
This is the difficulty in this spot.
And you know his hand is all spells. Because
Yeah,
he's
'cause I
missed
had
a land
lands.
drop and just played a land this turn.
Just 2 Thopters here from Brian. Now, Tim might still settle anyway. Yeah, and he's going to.
With Torrential Gearhulk in hand, if I'm Tim, I just cast a spell, keep your head above water. Going from 4 to 2 means suddenly Chandra just kills you. On top of what else are you doing with your mana?
Yep. Brian going to search up a couple basics now, given Settle the Wreckage and its resolution. So a forest and a mountain for BBD. And there is another land in an island. Now we're going to head back over to Tim.
I think I would have preferred an attack. It's small. I think I would have preferred attack with the Whirler Virtuoso rather than one of the Thopters, let's say, if you want to attack for a little bit but not too much. Because if you respect Torrential Gearhulk, and with Harris missing land drops and finally finding land number 6, got to be on your radar, I'd rather have as many flyers as possible.
As opposed to ground creatures.
Right.
Yep.
It's small, and BBD might have other considerations, but I would err towards, you know, get rid of the creature that's on the ground, keep your flyers if you're concerned about Torrential Gearhulk.
Well, in the game that we're in right now, the small things add up.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, Harris is at 4, you probably don't knock him out with one shot, but if you get him low enough, you know, something like Chandra off the top can suddenly win the game.
We're going to see a Bristling Hydra here, pre-combat from Brian.
And BBD doing this to induce a Torrential Gearhulk on a counterspell potentially, and then you know the coast is clear to attack with the Thopter, but not the Whirler Virtuoso.
Yep. Tim's going to take a look at his graveyard for no real reason.
But this spot, you know, let's say that, so you attack the previous turn with your Whirler Virtuoso, that gets hit with Cellar Wreckage, you make a token in response. I don't know. It's
Well, it's like you said.
having 2 flyers is so much better in this spot than having a flyer and a Virtuoso.
Yes, I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you.
Again, there are other considerations. BBD is trying to play around 1,000,000 cards right now, so it's not as simple as just what's the consideration about Torrential Gearhulk. But my instinct there was, if you're going to throw away something on the ground.
Six mana. There's a Gearhulk. Essence Scatter is going to take care of the Bristling Hydra. Going to stop Brian from getting the 4th in the battlefield and more energy. Here's your attack for 1. Harris going to fall down to 3. We'll go back over to Tim now. Fatal Push, it looks like, was the draw, and he's got Approach in his hand. But he doesn't have the... no, he's got 7 mana. Take that back.
The thing is, you can't be confident here that BBD is without a counterspell. Because if he's playing Torrential Gearhulk, he's got your Bristling Hydra covered anyway, because he has a 5/6 against your 4/3. So it's still possible that he had. If I'm in Harris's spot, I'm not saying it's 0% he has a counterspell in his hand because he didn't fight over this the last turn. If his counterspell is negate, then it could still be there. But the question is, what else does your hand let you do? You might not really have anything else you can set up here.
Tim was asking the judge for Oracle text on Nissa in case that shows up this game. It's a big game in the tournament here for Tim Harris. He wins this match. He beats one of the best players in the world, former world champion, and moves on to 8-2. For now, he's just going to pass the turn back, however. Brian will draw it. Now, Brian has picked up a copy of Chandra.
And that's why all these little points matter. If that Thopter is able to come across, and then your Chandra resolves, you're good.
There's the push. Now, will Brian cast the Chandra? I think he has to. I think waiting around is bad.
I don't. You know, you have a 2-turn window here where if Harris's hand is just lands, you go Chandra plus Chump block with World Virtuoso, you win the game. I don't know if you're going to be able to set up a better spot than that, even though, you know, I don't think it's likely this is game winning between the counter spells or a removal spell in your Warlord Virtuoso, what have you. You also might just spike a big spell and you can cast it. That's the other thing too.
Well, Servant of the Conduit's the reveal. I'm not sure I would consider that to be a big spell, but it's good enough for Brian to cast. Well, so he'll play that and get some more energy, which leads to another Thopter.
Right, and you get to basically set up the next turn the same way too. Like, you're up a chump blocker, so it's in theory another Chandra activation.
Tim will draw. His hand right now is approach, settle the wreckage, and it looks like he may have just drawn another copy of Fatal Push. Here comes Gearhulk into Chandra. Now Brian's the one with the decision to make. Brian wants to know, what do you got in that graveyard? What have you worked through this game? He's going to make a Thopter very quickly.
Yep, I like a chump block here. I think because he has Settle the Wreckage and Fumigate, I think your creature has to just be more valuable. Your Planeswalker has to be more valuable than a creature.
He says, I'm going to push. Servant's going to jump in front. Tim with Settle and Approach in hand, it appears. Definitely Approach. Very sure Settle as well. So Brian will draw Bristling Hydra. Reveal with Chandra. Attune with Ether.
That's probably worse than 2 damage.
Yeah.
Get him to 1.
Get him down to 1. Here's Bristling Hydra. Brian, oh, so close to crossing that finish line. Here comes Virtuoso, and it's not the prettiest Settle the Wreckage, Tim, but I think you gotta do it.
I mean, this.
There we go.
Yeah.
Brian will make a Thopter, of course.
I think Harris needed to stick this approach when he had a window a few turns ago.
Well, he's got to cast it now.
Yeah. Now he did not get to play around negate because he's still dead to negate in this spot. And he's been very mana inefficient. And if he had a little bit more breathing space with that life, he wouldn't have to be scrambling to answer every Thopter.
Yep. Yeah, he had that window to cast it. He elected not to do so. It's gotten him into a little bit of trouble. Essence Scatter the draw. Yeah, well, Tim, you got no choice. Yeah, you got to approach right now, and that's going to resolve. So he's going to go up to 8.
And now he can't contest the Chandra this turn either.
Yeah, because even attacking the Chandra doesn't matter. It doesn't kill it. So I think he might have to leave the Gearhulk back on defense. That's what he's going to do. So we're going to go back over to Brian. Brian's going to untap. Can't wait to see what his draw is. It's a negate.
That's a big one.
Indeed it is. Reveal Long Tusk Cub. Brian's got a little bit of thinking to do now. To cast or not to cast? That is the question.
Yeah, what's interesting is if you don't cast, then your Thopter knocks him down to 5, and if your Chandra survives for a turn, any spell kills with the emblem. Alternatively, a lot can go bad if you take that road, and it's just much safer to have an additional creature on the battlefield.
He'll play the Cub.
I would err towards casting here. I think if you had not drawn negate, you maybe would want to be a little bit more aggressive in the line that you take, but he's got a lot of cover now.
Boy, land that cycles and Fetid Pools was the draw here for Tim. So he's going to use, it looks like, Hub and Courtyard to cycle. Draw a card. Found a Glacial Fortress to go along with his Essence Scatter. Lands is not what Tim needs right now. That's for sure. He'll play that Glacial Fortress. I'll pass the turn back over to Brian. Brian is going to untap with some confidence here, and I would be pretty happy if I were him. He'll draw Bristling Hydra. He can ultimate Chandra here with confidence. No disallow. Yep, that's the thing he's a little bit scared of.
but he can negate back on disallow. So
there's your emblem for Chandra. You don't see it a lot. But whenever Brian plays a spell now, he gets to deal 5 to a creature or player. He drew a Bristling Hydra for the turn. And he says, I will deal 5 to you. The spell doesn't even have to resolve, folks. It's whenever you cast one. So Tim Harris is going to fall down to 2. And Brian's going to come across here with a couple of creatures.
And negate is cover.
In more ways than one. As Brian Braun-Duin is going to win this match here over Tim Harris 2 games to 1. Teamer Energy going to slide by Esper Approach, and maybe it was that little lack of indecision by Tim not playing that approach that did him in.
I think there was that 1-turn window, and like I said at the time, if I'm Harris's spot, I'm not 100% confident that BBD's hand doesn't have negate in it, because